Just the Way You Are, written by J. Bahari and AI. Introduction. In the quiet spaces, between words, in the unspoken moments where time seems to stand still, there exists a kind of love that transcends everything else, a love that doesn't need to be earned or proven, a love that simply is. It's the kind of love that flourishes not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in the gentle act of simply being there for each other. Just the way you are. This is the story of Lena and Daniel, two souls who found each other not in a moment of fate or destiny, but in the ordinary, everyday beauty of life. They weren't perfect, no one is, but they loved each other with a depth that went beyond the surface, beyond the flaws, beyond the imperfections. It was the kind of love that was rooted in understanding, patience, and the quiet recognition that they didn't have to change to be worthy of each other's hearts. Their love story wasn't a fairy tale, nor was it a tragedy. It was a journey of learning to accept each other in all their complexity, to find peace in the messiness of life, and to understand that sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is to let them be exactly who they are. From the very beginning, Lena and Daniel discovered that love wasn't about changing the other person, it was about growing alongside them, building a life together that was as imperfect as it was beautiful. This is the story of that love. A love that didn't need to be perfect, but simply needed to be real. And as you read, you'll come to see that, sometimes, the truest love is the one that comes to you without fanfare, in the small, everyday moments that stitch your life together, one gentle touch, one whispered word, one shared glance at a time. It was late summer in a city that never quite seemed to slow down, where the sun hung low over the horizon, casting golden light over every corner. In this city lived two people whose paths had never crossed, until that one evening, when everything changed. Lena had always been a dreamer. She worked as a graphic designer at a small studio, the kind that took on quirky projects for independent musicians and offbeat businesses. She was content in her own world, surrounded by her illustrations and sketchbooks. She wasn't what you'd call conventionally beautiful, at least, not in the way the glossy magazines would define it, but she had a quiet grace that drew people to her, a warmth that radiated from her eyes and the smile that reached all the way to her soul. Her hair, thick and wild, fell in unruly waves past her shoulders. Her skin, warm and olive-toned, carried the glow of a life lived in full color. She often felt like she was fading into the background of her own existence, unsure of where she fit in, unsure of whether the world saw her as enough. Then there was Daniel. He was a musician, someone whose heart beat to the rhythm of the world around him. He played guitar in a local band, and his life was always a whirlwind of rehearsals, gigs, and late-night songwriting. But it was not the fast pace of his life that made him memorable, it was his deep and effortless connection with the world, his ability to see beauty in even the most ordinary moments. Daniel wasn't the type of man who fit into the mold of what society often demanded: tall, broad-shouldered, effortlessly handsome. He was shorter than most of his friends, with curly dark hair that he always tried to tame but failed miserably. His eyes, a pale blue-gray, were always searching, always yearning, and his smile had a way of making people feel like they were the only one in the room. But it wasn't his smile, or his unruly hair, that drew people to him, it was the way he made them feel. He was the kind of person who listened as though every word you said mattered, as if your very existence was significant. And yet, like Lena, he often wondered if he truly belonged. It all started one evening at a local coffee shop. Lena had finished a long day of design work and decided to stop by her favorite spot, a cozy little place tucked away in the back streets of the city. The air smelled of cinnamon and fresh coffee beans, and the dim lighting felt like a soft embrace after the harshness of the day. She had her usual spot by the window, a place where she could watch the world go by, just far enough from the center of things to observe without being observed. Daniel was there too, though neither of them knew the other yet. He sat in the far corner, strumming his guitar lightly, lost in his own thoughts. The soft hum of the coffee shop mingled with the gentle sound of his playing. His music was like a thread weaving through the air, pulling at something inside of Lena, something she didn't even know was there. She glanced up from her sketchbook, drawn to the sound. It was then that their eyes met, just a brief moment, a fleeting connection, but one that would change everything. Daniel paused mid-strum, feeling the weight of her gaze. There was something in her eyes, something that spoke of quiet strength and hidden dreams. Lena blushed, quickly looking away, not used to being noticed like that, especially by someone like him. She wasn't the type to catch the attention of musicians or artists. Her heart skipped, but she tried to push the feeling down. It was nothing, just a moment, she told herself. But Daniel couldn't help it. He smiled gently and resumed playing, his fingers moving fluidly over the strings, a soft melody that seemed to fill the space between them. It was like he was playing just for her, for the quiet longing he saw in her eyes, for the loneliness they both seemed to carry. A few moments later, Lena, unable to resist, walked up to him. Her steps were hesitant, but something about the music tugged at her. I just wanted to say that your playing is beautiful, she said, her voice soft but sincere. Daniel looked up, surprised, but then the surprise melted into a warm, welcoming smile. Thank you. I didn't think anyone noticed, he replied, his voice rich and a little playful. Lena laughed lightly. How could I not notice? It's like you're speaking through your guitar. They shared a quiet moment, the air between them suddenly thick with possibility. It was as though, in that instant, they had both found a piece of themselves in the other. I'm Lena, she said after a beat, her voice still unsure, as if testing the waters. Daniel, he replied, extending his hand, the gesture warm, sincere, and strangely comforting. Over the next few months, Lena and Daniel became regulars at that coffee shop. They would meet after work, exchanging stories, thoughts, and laughter. Lena found herself looking forward to those moments, to the time they spent together in that small, intimate corner of the world. And Daniel, who had always been the one to make others feel seen, found himself drawn to her in ways he hadn't expected. He admired the way she saw the world, the way her creativity flowed like a river, unfiltered, pure, and full of life. She would show him her sketches, the whimsical designs that seemed to capture the soul of everything she touched. He would listen intently, asking questions, encouraging her to dream bigger. And she, in turn, began to see herself through his eyes. She saw her own worth in the way he valued her, the way he listened to her stories, the way he cared about her thoughts and ideas. It was as though he saw her, really saw her, for the person she was, not for what she looked like or what the world expected her to be. One evening, as they sat together, Daniel played a song he had written just for her. It wasn't the polished, perfect sound of a band performance. It was raw, imperfect, vulnerable, just like their relationship had been. Lena's heart swelled as the notes filled the air, each word speaking to her in a language only the two of them could understand. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, as though trying to absorb the depth of the emotions in the song. Then, with a soft smile, she reached out and touched his hand. That was beautiful, Daniel, she said, her voice a little shaky with emotion. You have no idea how much it means to me. He smiled back, his eyes full of tenderness. I think I do. You've made me feel like my music matters. Like I matter. Lena's heart ached at his words, and in that moment, she realized something. She had never felt more herself, more at home, than when she was with him. As their relationship grew, they both learned something precious from one another. Lena, with her quiet, introspective nature, taught Daniel to slow down, to savor the moments instead of rushing through them. She showed him the beauty in stillness, in listening, not just to the world, but to himself. And Daniel, with his passion and his music, taught Lena to believe in herself. He reminded her that she was enough, just the way she was, that she didn't have to change or fit into anyone's mold to be worthy of love. One evening, as they sat by the window of that same coffee shop, Daniel took Lena's hand in his and looked at her with the kind of tenderness that made her heart skip. You know, he said softly, I love you just the way you are. I always will. Lena smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She had never felt more seen, more loved, than in that moment. I love you, too, she whispered, the words feeling like they had been waiting for a lifetime to be spoken. And with that, they knew, there was no need to change, no need to be anyone other than who they were. They were perfect in their imperfection, their love an unspoken promise that they would always see each other, just as they were, and love each other more deeply because of it. Years passed, and Lena and Daniel's love continued to grow, deeper and more beautiful with every passing day. Their lives were full of music and art, of laughter and dreams shared between them. They traveled together, they fought, they made up, they celebrated. And through it all, one thing remained constant, the knowledge that they were enough for each other, just the way they were. In a world that constantly tried to tell them they weren't enough, they had found something rare, a love that asked for nothing more than for them to be themselves, just as they were. Years had passed since that first moment in the coffee shop, and while life had taken its usual twists and turns, one thing had never wavered: Lena and Daniel's love for each other. In fact, the more they navigated the labyrinth of life together, the deeper their connection grew. They had discovered, slowly and quietly, that the truest love was not one of grand gestures or perfect moments. It was one of consistency, understanding, and quiet presence, a love that was shaped in the smallest moments, in the way they held each other after a long day or shared a silent glance from across a room. But even in a love like theirs, there were challenges. Lena had begun to feel the weight of expectation, the subtle pressure to do more, to be more. As her career in graphic design flourished, she was offered bigger projects, higher-profile clients. There were whispers of bigger opportunities, of moving to a new city, of breaking into more prestigious circles. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate the success, she did, but somewhere, in the quiet recesses of her heart, she wondered if it was all for her. Or if it was simply what the world had told her she should want. Daniel, too, faced his own challenges. The band he had been a part of had started gaining traction, playing larger venues, attracting more attention. But the more successful his music became, the more he felt like he was losing the intimacy that had first drawn him to it, the late-night, basement jam sessions where the music came from a place of raw emotion, not expectation. They both had dreams, ambitions, and insecurities they hadn't fully shared with each other. But they had always been able to talk, really talk, and they knew that now, more than ever, they would need to lean on that strength. It was one chilly autumn evening when they realized that their love, though steady and unshakable, needed something more. Lena had just wrapped up a major project. It had been a whirlwind of late nights, sketching on napkins in between meetings, her mind spinning with color and design. When she finally finished, there was a strange emptiness that settled into her chest. The satisfaction of the accomplishment didn't feel as fulfilling as she had hoped. She sat at her desk late into the evening, her fingers tapping on the empty keyboard. The silence felt suffocating. Daniel, who had just returned from a tour stop in another city, came into the apartment to find her in the same spot, staring at her computer screen, her eyes unfocused. "You okay?" he asked, his voice warm, yet tinged with concern. Lena looked up, startled, as if she had forgotten he was even there. Her eyes were tired, but there was something more, something she hadn't admitted to herself yet. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I feel like I'm missing something. I keep pushing myself to do more, to be more. But when I get there, it's never enough." Her voice trembled just slightly. Daniel knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You've been working so hard. You deserve to rest, Lena. But maybe you're looking for something outside of yourself, and it's not there." Lena shook her head, as if to dismiss the thought. "No, I'm just trying to make something of myself. Trying to be something that matters." He took a deep breath. "Lena, you already matter. You've always mattered to me. And I think you're enough, just the way you are." Lena's heart squeezed, but she wasn't sure she believed it. She had spent so much of her life trying to measure up, trying to earn love and recognition. She had thought that success was the key to feeling whole. But now, in the quiet of their apartment, she wasn't so sure. She looked at Daniel, his tired face soft and earnest. "Do you really believe that?" she asked, her voice breaking. "That I'm enough, just the way I am?" "I do," he replied, his voice steady. "You've never had to be anything other than who you are for me. And I love you more for it." Lena felt a tear slip down her cheek, but it wasn't one of sadness, it was a tear of relief. She had been carrying this weight for so long, trying to prove something to the world, to herself. But in that moment, in the presence of Daniel's unwavering love, she realized something crucial: she didn't have to prove anything. She was already enough. Around the same time, Daniel was grappling with his own feelings of inadequacy. The more the band's popularity grew, the more he felt alienated from his own music. He longed for the days when they played for a handful of people, when their songs were about raw, real feelings, and not the expectations of labels, managers, or audiences. The pressure of success began to suffocate him, and he found himself withdrawing more and more into himself. One evening, after a particularly draining rehearsal, he and Lena sat on the couch in their living room, the dim light casting long shadows across the room. "I don't think I want to keep doing this," Daniel said suddenly, his voice thick with frustration. "Not the way it is now. I'm not sure I can keep up with the pace, with all the pressure. The music doesn't feel like mine anymore." Daniel spent more time alone with his guitar, writing songs in the solitude of their apartment, rediscovering the raw emotion that had first driven him to music. He pulled away from the pressure of the industry, taking control of his art again. He started collaborating with smaller, independent artists, working on projects that reignited his passion for the music itself, not the fame or recognition that came with it. Lena, too, took a step back. She scaled back on the high-profile projects and started taking on work that felt meaningful to her. She began creating pieces for local nonprofits, illustrating stories of the people she met, stories that were raw, unpolished, and real. Her work started to feel personal again, and with each stroke of her pen, she found herself returning to the woman she had always been but had lost touch with. In time, the weight that had once weighed them both down, of expectation, of outside approval, began to lift. Their love, which had always been rooted in acceptance, grew even deeper. They no longer sought validation from the world around them. They had found everything they needed in each other. One evening, as they sat together on the same couch, a guitar resting in Daniel's lap, Lena looked at him with a quiet, steady gaze. "I love you," she said simply, her voice full of conviction. "Just the way you are." Daniel smiled, his fingers gently strumming a few notes on the guitar. "I love you, too. Just the way you are." And for the first time in their lives, they both understood what it meant to be truly free, to be loved, not for who they could be or who they should be, but for who they were, exactly as they were. And in that simple truth, they had found everything they'd ever been searching for. As time continued to flow, Lena and Daniel's relationship became a living testament to the beauty of accepting one another just the way they were. It wasn't always perfect, life had a way of throwing its challenges at them, but it was real, raw, and honest. Their shared life was filled with quiet moments of intimacy and deep connection. On weekends, they would go for long walks in the park, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes they didn't even speak. They would simply walk in companionable silence, comfortable in each other's presence, listening to the rhythm of their footsteps against the earth. But it wasn't just in the stillness where their love thrived, it was in the messy, unpredictable moments as well. There were days when they fought, days when frustration or misunderstandings would cloud their hearts. Lena would retreat into herself, her mind a swirling mess of doubt. Daniel would pull away, trying to protect himself from the vulnerability that always seemed to come with opening up. But no matter how many misunderstandings they had, no matter how many times they grew frustrated with one another, they always returned to the same place, love. They learned over time that no argument, no disagreement, no moment of distance could ever truly break them. What mattered was that they came back, always, to the center of their bond, the understanding that they were both enough, just the way they were. One evening, as the winter winds began to settle in and the world outside their apartment turned cold and gray, Daniel found himself feeling a strange sense of anticipation. It had been nearly a year since he had made the decision to step away from the pressures of the music industry. His solo work had gained a small but dedicated following. He was no longer bound to the expectations of fame or success, but instead, he was creating music for himself, for the joy of it. Still, something was missing. His heart ached in a way he couldn't quite put his finger on. He looked over at Lena, who was sitting at the kitchen table, working on her latest design. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, but she still wore that same peaceful expression he had fallen in love with years ago, the one that spoke of both quiet strength and a deep, abiding love for him. In that moment, he realized that what had been missing wasn't external, it was a deeper commitment to the future they were building together. "Lena," he said, his voice breaking the quiet, "I've been thinking about something." She looked up from her sketchbook, her eyes bright with curiosity. "What's on your mind?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. It wasn't like him to be unsure, but this was different. He could feel the weight of the moment in the air. I've been thinking about how much I love you, and how grateful I am for everything you've brought into my life. How much you've helped me rediscover who I am, and how I've been able to really see you for who you are. And I want to keep growing with you in every way possible. Lena's heart beat faster. Daniel, what are you trying to say? He took a deep breath. I think it's time we take the next step. Not just in our careers, but in our life, together. I want to marry you, Lena. I want to build a life with you, no matter where it takes us. I don't want to go through this world without you by my side. Lena's breath caught in her throat. A mixture of shock, joy, and overwhelming emotion filled her chest. For years, she had known Daniel was her person, the one she was meant to share her life with, but hearing him say the words aloud felt like a dream coming true. She stood up and walked toward him, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. I don't need a big ceremony or extravagant promises, Daniel continued, his voice soft, almost reverent. All I need is you, just the way you are. Will you marry me, Lena? Lena didn't speak for a moment. Instead, she wrapped her arms around him, holding him close as if to say everything she couldn't put into words. When she finally pulled back, she wiped a tear from her cheek and smiled brightly, her heart full to the brim. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. Yes, I will. The months that followed were filled with the kind of joy that can only come from knowing you're walking a path that feels right. They decided to keep things simple, choosing a small, intimate ceremony with only their closest friends and family. The idea of a grand wedding didn't appeal to either of them. What mattered was the commitment they were making, not just to each other, but to the future they would build side by side. Their wedding day was a reflection of their love, unassuming, full of authenticity, and grounded in the quiet beauty of the world around them. Lena wore a simple dress she had picked out months earlier, one that made her feel like herself, and Daniel wore a suit that had seen better days, but he wore it with the same kind of pride he wore every part of himself, with love. They said their vows in a quiet ceremony under the shade of an old oak tree in a park they both loved. The wind rustled the leaves above them as they exchanged promises, and there, in that small corner of the world, they sealed their future together. As they stood side by side, hands entwined, Lena looked at Daniel, her heart full of a quiet certainty. He was the person she had been waiting for, even if she hadn't realized it at the time. He was the one who saw her for who she truly was, and who had made her believe, for the first time in her life, that she was enough, just the way she was. The years continued to pass, and life, as it always does, presented its challenges. There were moments of joy, like the time Daniel's music finally reached a wider audience, or when Lena's design work was featured in a gallery. There were moments of pain, like the loss of a loved one, or the hard, quiet days when their dreams seemed far out of reach. But through it all, they had each other. Through it all, they had learned the most important lesson of all: love wasn't something they had to earn. It wasn't something they had to change for or prove they were worthy of. It was simply something that had always been. As they grew older, their love didn't fade, it deepened, becoming more rooted in their shared history, the laughter, the struggles, the moments of quiet and joy. Theirs was a love that didn't rely on perfection, but on understanding, on the willingness to stand by each other's side no matter what. One evening, many years later, as they sat on their porch swing, the same one they had bought when they first moved in together, they watched the sun set behind the hills. The sky turned pink, then purple, and finally dark as the stars began to twinkle above them. Lena rested her head on Daniel's shoulder, and he kissed her temple, his fingers gently brushing through her hair. You know, he said softly, his voice low and intimate, I think we've got it right. Lena smiled, her heart full. I think we do, too. Just the way we are. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet peace of the evening and the warmth of their shared love, they both knew that they had found everything they had ever needed, together. Just the way they were. As the years unfolded, Lena and Daniel's love story settled into a quiet rhythm, a deep, steady pulse that neither sought to change nor needed to. It wasn't a love that demanded grand moments or dramatic gestures, it was built on the foundation of understanding, respect, and the subtle beauty of shared lives. The kind of love that doesn't grow old because it simply becomes a part of you, woven into the fabric of your days, so much so that it feels eternal. They found their way into a peaceful existence, full of simple joys. Each morning, Lena would wake first, the early sunlight casting a soft glow on the room as she prepared coffee, the warm scent filling their small kitchen. Daniel, the musician who had long since traded the frenetic pace of the band for more intimate, solo work, would join her soon after, his curls tousled from sleep, his eyes still soft with the remnants of dreams. They would sit at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, talking about the day ahead, or sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence, the knowledge that they were together enough to fill the space between them. Their love, like the coffee in their mugs, had deepened over time. The sweetness of the early days had softened into something more profound, more nourishing, like the gradual unfolding of a flower, or the steady flow of a river carving its way through the land. There were seasons of laughter, of shared experiences and milestones that anchored them even deeper into each other's lives. They traveled together, exploring places they had only dreamed of in their youth, quiet villages in Italy, the rugged cliffs of Ireland, the vast expanses of the American West. But no matter where they went, no matter the beauty of the landscape, they always returned home to each other, because that was where they truly belonged. At home, there was the constant hum of their lives together, Lena working on her designs, her hands always moving, always creating. Daniel at his desk, his guitar resting beside him, creating new melodies that seemed to flow out of his heart. Sometimes, in the middle of their respective projects, one of them would stop, look at the other, and simply smile, as if to say, "We are here together. And that's enough." And so it was. It wasn't until later in life, when their hair had grayed slightly, when laughter lines had etched themselves into the corners of their eyes, that Lena and Daniel came to realize just how deep their love had grown. In the stillness of those years, they would often reflect on how their journey together had always been full of small moments, the tiny, seemingly insignificant things that, when strung together, created something extraordinary. They had always lived with the quiet sense of gratitude, but it was in those later years that it became almost sacred. Each day, each hour, was a gift. They no longer worried about what the future held, no longer measured themselves against the world's impossible standards. They had long since given up the idea that happiness was something to chase. Instead, they found it in the comfort of each other's company, in the simple routines that had grown to mean everything. Lena had, over the years, become more and more confident in herself, no longer the unsure, anxious woman who had once questioned her place in the world. Daniel's music, too, had evolved, his songs a reflection of the quiet love he shared with Lena, as well as the changes they both had undergone. Their home was full of art, paintings, sketches, photographs, all collected over the years, and music, too. It was a home that radiated warmth, not just from the hearth, but from the bond they had forged. Then came the inevitable, the moment that neither of them wanted to think about, but both knew was part of life's natural course. It came in the form of a quiet afternoon, when Daniel was sitting on the porch swing, the same swing they had purchased all those years ago, his guitar resting on his knee. Lena had been in the garden, tending to the flowers that bloomed every spring with vibrant color. She had always loved this time of year, the gentle warmth of the sun, the fragrance of jasmine in the air, and the soft sound of birds chirping as the world awakened from the cold grasp of winter. But that day, something in her heart told her that time was, in its own quiet way, beginning to run out. Not in any dramatic way, just the slow, inevitable passage of moments that we can never quite stop. She had felt it before, but this time, the feeling was sharper, more defined. It was the awareness that both of them had lived through so much, and yet, there were so many things left unsaid, unspoken. She knelt beside him on the swing, her hand resting gently on his. He looked at her with a soft smile, his eyes warm as ever, but there was something in them, a quiet wisdom that only comes from a life well lived, and lived together. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice soft, the weight of the moment hanging between them, "do you ever think about the future? About what comes next?" He didn't answer right away, but simply reached for her hand, squeezing it gently, his thumb brushing the back of her fingers, as though reassuring her that he was still there, still present, even if the world around them was changing. "I think about it," he said slowly. "But I'm not afraid of it anymore. I think, if we've learned anything, it's that we're already where we need to be." Lena nodded, the truth of his words settling in her chest like a comfort, like a warm blanket. Just the way we are, she repeated, the words so familiar, so deep in their souls that they no longer needed to speak them aloud. Yes, he whispered back. Just the way we are. The years rolled on, and while the inevitability of change still hung in the air, they both came to realize that they had lived a life so full, so rich in love and meaning, that the thought of what came next wasn't as frightening as it once might have been. They had already created something beautiful together, something that would last far beyond their time on this earth. It was one evening, when the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and amber, that Daniel quietly passed away in his sleep. It was gentle, peaceful. There was no drama, no struggle. Just a quiet ending, as if he had simply slipped from one world to the next, his hand still gently holding Lena's, his love for her so evident in the stillness of the room. Lena, though heartbroken, knew in the deepest part of herself that she had been loved in a way few people ever would be. She had known the kind of love that accepted her, just the way she was, and she had given that same love back in return. Their time together, though finite, had been infinite in the richness it had brought into her life. The memories of their first kiss, their shared laughter, the moments of deep conversation and quiet companionship, would stay with her always. Years passed. Lena lived on, carrying Daniel's spirit with her. She kept writing, kept designing, kept creating, pouring all the love, all the lessons, and all the beauty he had shown her into every stroke of her pen, into every design, into every day. She would sometimes find herself sitting on the porch swing, alone now, looking up at the stars, feeling the quiet presence of his love beside her. And though her heart ached, it also sang with gratitude. For she knew, without a doubt, that love like theirs, the kind that doesn't demand, that doesn't change, that simply exists, never really leaves. It lingers, quietly, steadily, forever. And when her time finally came, when the winds of time called her home, she was ready. She had lived a life that was enough. Just the way she was. And as she closed her eyes for the final time, she smiled, knowing that Daniel was there, waiting for her, just the way he was. Together again. Forever. The love they had shared had no end. It simply was. The end. Disclaimer. The characters, events, and settings depicted in this series are the products of the author's imagination and are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. This series contains mature themes, including but not limited to romantic and erotic content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Reader discretion is advised. The depictions of relationships, encounters, and situations are intended for entertainment purposes only and do not reflect real-life practices or endorse any specific behaviors. The portrayal of characters, including their actions and interactions, is intended to be a dramatic and fictional narrative. The series is not intended to promote or condone any form of violence, exploitation, or abuse. This is a creation meant to entertain and should not be considered a role model for real-life behavior. Readers are reminded that this is a work of fiction and should enjoy it as such. Any interpretations or applications of the content within real-world contexts are the responsibility of the reader. The author and publishers disclaim any liability for actions taken by readers based on fictional portrayals and scenarios in the series. Notes J. Bahari, the imaginative mind this story, and has a unique talent for weaving tales of love, mystery, romance, and adventure, with a flair for creating captivating characters and intricate plots. J. Bahari's storytelling is enriched by a deep understanding of human nature and a keen eye for detail, crafting narratives that resonate with both excitement and emotional depth. This is a testament to Bahari's ability to blend intrigue with passion, creating a world where the extraordinary becomes reality. In this creative journey, J. Bahari has harnessed the power of artificial intelligence to enhance the storytelling process. With the help of AI input, Bahari has been able to explore new dimensions of creativity, pushing the boundaries of conventional storytelling to deliver an experience that is both innovative and compelling. Together, Jay Bahari and AI have crafted a series that not only entertains but also captivates the imagination, inviting readers into a world where seduction and suspense intertwine in the most alluring ways. This collaboration stands as a testament to the endless possibilities that arise when human creativity meets cutting-edge technology, forging a path to stories that are as mesmerizing as they are unforgettable.
Of compassion, he decodes old school soul in a digital age. Jay Bahari's love breaking out of waves.